We have a lot of material. We have a lot of great presentations. And best of all, we have a tremendous attendance here. How many have been here in Dayton for all 5 years? Wow, look at that. How many, this is your first year at CTU. Congratulations. We're very proud to have returning students, but we welcome all the new ones. I'm sure you're going to find the day to be extremely interesting. First off, a little housekeeping. I'd like to thank Jerry, K1SO, who does a lot of the behind-the-scenes work, helps with registration, and make sure everything runs smooth here. Free TX. Scott is heading up the Youth CTU that you may have heard about, and Youth CTU is running in the Beckel room with N5OT and N0AX and a host of others. They're getting ready to do a Skype video conference to Russia. We've got RA2FZ is here from Russia to help do some interpretation. So that's going to be going on. They're talking to some very young YL hotshot CW operators there. We have embraced the web this year, and the man in the back behind the curtain is Ken, K4ZW, and Ken is the guy that brings webinars through the PVRC. And if you want to see some of Ken's work, you go to pvrc.org, and there is a whole historic log set of his webinars that he has been doing over the past several years. And I thought that it would be fabulous to bring the webinar experience to Dayton. So right now, about 80 to 90 people around the world are logged in to the webinar and are getting to hear us and see the slides that we're presenting here at Dayton today for the first session. So from 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, that's a webinar. And then at the end of the day, a second webinar with Rob Sherwood from 4 to 5 p.m. And then the webinars are recorded and archived so that they can be available at any time after the event here. Thanks to all the professors that stepped up. Once again, a lot of these professors have taught all 5 years here, but you can look in their bios in the front of your book and see that we have some of the very best of the best, not only from the standpoint that they've got a lot of contesting experience, but they've got a lot of teaching and sharing experience. And that's really what we're here today for. And just briefly, you have an ICOM notepad, and thanks to ICOM for making a big part of this happen. It was ICOM, the division that Ray Novak, N9JA, had back when we started this, that really got Contest University moving forward. So if you happen to see Ray at the show, at the ICOM booth, make sure you go up and thank him for his support. That notepad is very important. You will hear so many things today that you've not heard before. You will hear ideas for how you operate, what you do in your station, maybe a project that you need to tend to. Write it down. Because if you don't write it down, you're going to forget it. And that's why the notepad is in there. In your, inside the bag, the CQ ICOM bag, there is also a stapled packet. That stapled packet has a release form, which I need. I need you to sign that, and at the break you can stack it on the table outside. It also has the vote form. The vote form, this is not a popularity vote. This is the session that I missed, and I want to see it. So because there are 4 sessions running at once, you may miss a session. And so this is to vote for what you didn't see in the first 3 sessions this morning. So, and then we'll rerun those sessions and try and make sure that you get the most out of this. Currently, we're moving the VHF presentation by W5ZN and the SO2R presentation by Randy Thompson, K5ZD. We're interchanging those. And the reason is Ed Munns, W0YK, called me a little after 6 this morning. He said he had to go to the hospital. Now, he believes it's just a little stomach problem, maybe due to something he ate. In true contest format, 15 minutes ago he called and he said, you know what, they've got me hooked up to an IV. I've got some fluids in me. I'm feeling pretty good. They're going to scan my stomach, but you know, about after that, I'm out of here. So he could be back by 10 o'clock to teach ready. Back to the packet. Inside that packet are vouchers. There's a $10 voucher to go buy ARL books. And several of the authors that have produced books here in the last year are here. The antenna book, Dean Straw was very implemental in the antenna book. This is something everybody should have. Dean N6BV is here in the audience today. Of course, the Managing RF Interference. If you haven't bought it from NRAD, there's a $15 voucher in your packet for that. These are ARL books that are available at the ARL Expo, and that's what the $10 voucher is for. Things like Hands-on Radio Experiments by N0AX. Antenna Towers for the Radio Amateur. Don Daso, K4ZA. Don is teaching here at CTU. The ARL Handbook. This is a project headed up and led by Ward Silver, N0AX. So that's something that you might want to get at the ARL booth. And then ON4UN's Low Band DXing is another new book. That's the 5th edition that's available at the ARL. And K1BR's book on antenna zoning is available here. There's an $8 voucher in your packet if you're interested in buying that book. So we'll see a little snippet of the TI-5N video just after lunch, and there's a voucher in there for $5 to purchase that at the show. On your CD, W8WWV, Greg, where are you? In the back. Greg, if you haven't been to his website, he has a tremendous website. It's seedsolutions.com. But W8WWV took a lot of time to create a tutorial on how to use EasyNet. And it's not in your book. And he's not going to be able to cover that. That's in addition to the slide deck that he put together that he'll present today. But there's a better than 100-page tutorial that shows up on your CD on how to use EasyNet. So today you get a small snippet, and then there's follow-up work on the area of using EasyNet that Greg was kind enough to put together, and we put that on the CD. I still have a very few dinner tickets to the contest dinner on Saturday night. See me afterwards if you'd like that. And then we have, every year we have somebody who is very good about getting their release form back to me. 2 minutes after I gave Paul and Anna their release forms, they were signed off and back in my hands. So I'd like to congratulate W0ANT and N0AH with the first return of the release forms this year with these 2 prizes. And W0ANT, I'm told, has just learned that she is the Rocky Mountain Amateur of the Year in the Rocky Mountain division. The main objective today, share and have fun. Here we go with Doug Grant, Contesting the Right Way.
I'll start with the same line I use every year. I'd rather do this on CW, but we'll have to do it on phone. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Oh, most of you seem to be awake. Those of you who have been there the past few years have seen earlier versions of this talk, and if you're thinking, oh, he's just going to talk about the same old epic stuff, I added some new stuff. There's about 20% new things. So if you saw it last year, the year before, there's still some surprises in here, so stay awake. let's start with a little philosophy. Why is it that we play games in the first place? Well, a game is a contest with rules to determine a winner. That's pretty straightforward. Or it can be an amusement or pastime. But as Tim just alluded, it's fun. It should be fun. That's what this is about. If it was work, we'd have to get paid for it. So this is fun. We're not getting paid. Games of skill are a means of exploring your own capabilities. You know, the early games about had to do with how far you could throw something, or who could run faster than the other guy, or who could lift a heavier weight. Those had sort of practical applications around the farm or whatever. But there are all sorts of capabilities you can measure, and there are sports and games that have not much to do with your physical prowess, but have to do with what's going on between your ears. Games encourage you to look at and understand and experience things, maybe new things, maybe old things in a different way than you've looked at them before. And I think that applies to our little game here of contesting. And most importantly, I think games teach people lessons about themselves and the world and allow those kinds of insights to be passed on to others, things we're doing today. So let's talk about an unusual game. I'm going to describe a game here. The entrants get to keep their own score. There's nobody watching. There are very complicated rules that govern the scoring, and a lot of people can't figure them out or get them a little bit wrong. But the rules are complicated at best. There are individual and team entries permitted. Some of the events include off times. You have to have a certain amount of time when you're not participating in the event. The winners at the top level event often have invested tens of thousands of dollars to get where they are. And sometimes, in order to really compete well, they travel to advantaged locations. There's an online network that some participants use to improve their scores. And spectators just don't find it particularly interesting. I am talking, of course, about bird watching. What? You're in the right place. This is Contest University. It's about radio stuff. Birding is the appropriate term, by the way, not bird watching. The birders are highly offended when you call it bird watching. Birders keep track of their life lists. That's bird species that you have personally seen or encountered in the course of your lifetime. That's DXCC in birding. Audubon started what he called the Christmas Day bird count back in 1900, where every day on Christmas, after people had had their big meals, they would go out and they would count how many different species of birds they could see, and they would write to him and he would keep track of them. It was sort of a semi-scientific survey that was done, and it's still done today. But there was a book called Wild America written by a guy named Roger Torrey Peterson, and it was about birds and the different species in North America and how they migrate and where you might see them and their nesting habits and so forth and so on. And at the end of his book, he kicked off an entire sport with one innocent little line that said, "My year's list at the end of 1953 was 573 species." And everybody who read that line said, "Huh, I bet I can do more than that." And they have been. There are so many parallels between radio contesting and birding, it's actually scary. As unique as you think our community is, they're just like us. They have a premier event like we do. We have the Worldwide and the WRTC. They have a thing called Big Year, where you travel around North America and try to encounter as many species as possible. These guys are nuts, by the way. Just to give you a sense for how nuts these guys are, in North America there are 675 indigenous species. The guy who holds the record for a big year observed 745. Now, the way he accomplished that was he saw nearly all the bird species that are indigenous, plus he traveled to places like Attu Island at the end of the Aleutians during an El Nino year when all the birds got blown off course when they were migrating. So all these Asiatic birds that shouldn't be in North America kind of got confused and ended up landing on Attu Island saying, "Where am I? This doesn't look familiar." And these birders were out there, "Ah, I saw one of those." So he went over the top. So the record is 745. There are smaller events. They do big days. We do sprints. They have birding on the .net, which is their packet cluster. They spot rare birds. We travel to Zone 9, Zone 10, Zone 33. They have certain migratory paths. There's this one particular island in Texas, not actually an island. It's a hill. Well, it's not even a very big hill. It just happens to be where a bunch of big trees grow. And the birds that migrate across the Gulf of Mexico see that first, and they all land there completely out of breath and out of everything from having flown nonstop across the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see a couple of hundred bird species migrating towards Canada, and they all land on this one spot. And every birder knows that's where you go. It's sort of like 160 at the top of the hour. Everybody knows that's where you need to be, and that's where these birders go. The only book or movie, there's really no book about contesting, and we need to fix that. There was a movie, a very old movie called To Win the World. Terrific movie, but way out of date now. We need a new one. There's a book about birding, and write this down on your ICOM notepad. Here's the book. It's called The Big Year. It's great. It's a quick read. It's, I don't know, 2 or 3 long airplane rides or, a few evenings. And you will recognize everything we do in that book. They have guys who are rumored to cheat. They argue about whether this is a new species or this species should be deleted. They do everything we do. And they have their conventions. Their annual convention moves around. The American Birding Association has 17,000 members, and they have conventions. They move around. We have Dayton and Visalia. I mean, they even have pile-ups. Okay, so why do we do radio contests? We do it for fun. We do it for self-improvement. We do it for personal satisfaction. I built a station that can work something that no one else can, or I've improved my skills that I can run CW, guys on CW faster than anybody can. Then, of course, there are the lucrative financial rewards. Oh, wait a minute. What was I thinking? And there's peer recognition. Some of these things are internal, and some of them are external. The peer recognition part is, you come here and everyone says, hey, that was a great score you put up last year in the worldwide. Or, gee, I heard you the other day working guys that I couldn't hear. What are you using? There's that element of it. But there's a lot more internal satisfaction that you get out of it. And you should focus on that, really. So you ever try explain radio contesting to a non-ham or a non-contester? Okay, it's like this. We operate for some period of time. We write down all the stations or type them in on a computer so you can make the most contacts in most states and most countries. They usually say, all right, how do you know who won? Say, well, we send our logs in to the sponsor, and they check them and score them. And then the big question is, how do you prevent cheating? If no one's watching the competitors, how do you know they aren't breaking some kind of rule? And now we're going to talk about the ethics side of this game. The birders have ethics problems too, by the way. Ethics in contesting, ethics in general, is choosing to do the right thing when no one's looking. With SDR technology, by the way, people are looking at what happens on the air. A couple of years ago, we used some SDR technology and a bunch of remote skimmers set up, and we recorded the entire 160-meter contest, the whole band for the whole contest from 5 locations. So we could go back afterwards and actually do the instant replay. If we saw a contact in a log that looked fishy, we could go back and listen to it and see what actually got sent. And we could hear it from the European side, and we could hear it from the U.S. side and say, oh, that call's wrong, and we've got the proof right here. Boom, that one's out of the log. When I announced that at the contest forum a couple of years ago, there were several people in the room who were absolutely horrified that someone might be able to hear what they had done on the air. So if you don't want someone playing it in front of the contest forum the next year, be careful what you do on the air in contest, because we'll get you. We'll play it back. But any unenforceable rules move into the category of ethics. So what do we mean by ethics? I'm not a student of ethics and morals and so forth. I'm not a psych major. I was an engineer. But anyway, the web's wonderful. You can find any definition you want. So I find a couple of interesting definitions. Ethics is the theory of right and wrong actions in a social system. And it's the written and unwritten codes of principles that govern decisions and actions. Morals is different. Morals is your personal beliefs about right and wrong, and those define your personal character. One generally held moral belief is murder is wrong. That's a pretty good one. Ethics is knowing the difference between right and wrong and choosing to do it in the context of one's peers, one's profession, whatever, and the classic example is the lawyer. The lawyer may and probably does believe personally that murder is wrong, but a lawyer who is a defense attorney has an obligation to give make sure that a murderer, an accused murderer, has a fair trial. So even though he may think that the guy is scum, he's got to make sure he's got a fair trial. That's the ethics versus moral dilemma that some people get themselves into. Fortunately, we don't have that problem in radio contests, and that's a big deal. But I found an interesting quote. The morals and values of one participant may differ from those of another. It's therefore an obligation of coaches, captains, leaders, and professors at Contest University to define basic sports morals and values that they want their teams to adhere to and then lead by example. And this is from someone who writes a lot about morals and cheating in sport and so forth. And I think that's an important thing. If you are perceived as a leader in any sport, including radio sport, you ought to be leading by example, and you ought to be telling people what you're doing is not right. Turn the amplifier down. Things like that. And it's easy stuff to do. So why do ethics matter? I don't know what's wrong with that picture. It looked okay before. But here are two guys, pictures of two guys who played baseball, or did play baseball. And one of them had the home run record, and the other one beat that home run record. Which one do you have the most respect for? Why? Yeah, Barry Bonds used steroids. He cheated. He didn't play the game by the same rules as the other guy. So even though he's got more home runs, do you respect him? Not really. One of these presidents was so unpopular he was assassinated. One of them was so popular that for opening up trade with China, which no one thought would ever happen. Oh, wait a minute. No, one of them is Tricky Dick and one is Honest Abe. I mean, their accomplishments are sometimes outweighed by how they make those accomplishments happen, just like the baseball guys. So ethics matters. It matters to your long-term reputation. So how do we know what to do in radio contesting? There are written rules, like we talked about before in the definition of ethics. There are written rules and there are unwritten rules. The written rules are specified. They're in black and white. They're on the web. Then there are the unwritten rules, and they are kind of the interpreted norms, and it's kind of a gray area. So some of the written rules are very clear, right? In the single operator categories, for all single operator categories, one person, the operator, can contribute to the final score during the official contest period. And another one, total output power per band must not exceed 1,500 watts or the output power regulations of the country in which the entrant is operating, whichever is less. Some people break these rules. They really shouldn't. Now, this one may not have reproduced well in your handouts. Those of you watching on the webinar are getting the benefit of the full color, and the people watching the screen here can see it. Here's a very interesting, very deliberate, and very elaborate cheating scheme that we picked up a while back. Let's just say the call sign being used was XY1Z. And the call signs in the log are just things I excerpted from an operation I was at a few years ago and had a log that I could mess with. This log was interesting. There were band changes. I'm illustrating it here, a band change every 5 minutes. This was a single operator log. The actual log had a band change every 10 minutes for the entire 48-hour contest period. Does that sound right? Well, so part of the log checking, we took that thing apart. And here in color, the green QSOs are on 10, the reds are on 15, just as the illustrative example. So one of the things we can do now that we get all the logs in electronic form is we can compare the times to the guys that were worked in this log, because we have all those logs too. So we compare the times in the logs to see how they match up. And you can see over on the right, I think this works. Over on the right, we have the actual time of the QSO. So the ones that are in bold print are QSOs where there was a mismatch on the time. And as you can see, there are a fair number of them. So what happened was, if you resort the log by the actual original time, you can sort of see what was happening. This guy was actually running on 10 meters here, and a few QSOs on 15 were showing up. But it wasn't like he was changing bands, because sometimes they even happened in the same minute. What happened was the guy had actually 2 stations running, 2 operators running, 2 stations. And then after the contest, they massaged the times to make it look like they took QSOs that were interleaved like this. They took them apart and they reordered them so they were stacked up every 10 minutes. That's the level of detail some people will go to cheat in this stuff. Is that worse than running high power or using the cluster and not claiming it? Cheating's cheating. You know? Okay, there are some other written rules. Off times must be a minimum of 60 minutes in length. This is one of those seasonal debates every year on CQ contests, right after sweepstakes. People are talking about how long off times are. Well, I got on at 0, I got off at 00, and I made my next contact at 59. Is that 60 minutes or 59? Or do I have to wait till 0101? Is that 60 minutes or 61? And that's a great one. The log must show the correct serial number sent and received for each contact. It's not that hard. You know, copy what the guy sends, put it in the log. It's not that hard. Some people don't necessarily do it. This is a good one. The exchange consists of signal report and serial number. Serial numbers sent must be progressive, starting with 001. Last time this popped up, there were 16 comments on CQ contest arguing about whether you had to start really with 001. Or could you start with 1? Or could you start with 000001? Or could you start with 1027, 1 hour into the contest? There's a written rule, self-spotting or asking other stations to spot you is not allowed. That's pretty clear, but people do that still. Only the entrance call sign may be used to aid the entrance score. That means if you're at a multi-op in the CQ Worldwide contest, you can't have one of the operators on a band that's not quite open yet calling CQ with his own call until it opens and then switch to the multi-single call and use it there. You can't do that. That's against the rule. The essence of the unwritten rules is just because it's not specifically prohibited doesn't mean you can do it. One of the big things that comes up every year is what kind of changes can I make to my log after the contest? Well, for most of us, you keep the contest on the radio and within the contest period. That means not making skids in advance. That means not doing anything to the log when the contest is over. Randy and I have had this rivalry going for a few years in the CQ Worldwide CW, and after the contest is over, one of us calls the other one, and then the challenge is, you know, all right, I just sent my log in. Is yours in yet? This is, you know, an hour after the contest is over, and we're still kind of groggy and so forth, but, you know, he doesn't want me going back and messing with things in my log, and I don't want him doing it. He's going to beat me anyway. Another part of the unwritten rules is don't give or take an unfair advantage, like running high power or any one of 100 other things that could be an unfair advantage. So making prearranged skids, that's a bad idea. Asking friends like your local club to work you and only work you and not work the guy that you're competing against, that's not fair. Asking what frequency the VY1 is on during sweepstakes. No, don't do that. Even worse, when someone does tell you, yeah, the VY1 is just up 10 kilohertz, asking the guy who told you, listen, can you hold this frequency? It's nice and clear, so I'm going to go work the VY1 and come back. I mean, that's piling one bad behavior on top of another. As much as you want to help your friends, don't run around and work them with a club call, because it's probably going to be, if you don't work anybody else, that contact's going to be unique. It's going to be suspect. In some contests, it will be taken out of your log, but it always shows up as something, well, how come, you know, this guy works 2 or 3 stations in a row every contest? Because we see the same logs year after year. So don't do that. Don't work friends with club calls. Don't call them on the phone. Don't do that. Most contests have a rule that prohibit the use of non-amateur means during the contest period to arrange or solicit QSOs. So don't do that. Having others help you with your single op effort. I want to make one thing really clear about one terminology thing that we wrestle with. There's a category in many contests called single operator assisted. The assistance does not mean having a friend operate for you for a little while you take a nap or when you get tired. That is not the kind of assistance indicated in single op assisted. There are people who need to have that repeated because some of them have people help. Here's another part of playing fair. Don't exceed the power limits for your category. If the knobs go to 11, which you can see right there, don't turn them up to 11. If you're not familiar with that reference, go on YouTube and search for a movie called Spinal Tap and look for a quote, "These go to 11." And there's a guy in a rock band saying, "Oh, we have these custom amplifiers built. These go to 11. You know, you're playing along. You need a little more to just get over the cliff. You turn it up from 10 to 11. If you're playing at 10, if you've got an amp that only goes to 10, where can you go from 10? Nowhere. Turn it up to 11. Boom, you've got it." And the interviewer says, "Well, why don't you just make 10 louder?" Well, these go to 11. Other synonyms, every region of the country in the world has their own synonyms: smoke, gas, soup, smash, the iMac antenna tuner. You know, those are right out. Some more of the unwritten rules. No log washing. This means research using QRZ.com, spots, 3830 reports, LOTW, whatever. Using any utilities. There are some great utilities for analyzing your log. You know what? Don't use them until you submit your log. Get your log in, and then use SH5 to try and figure out, oh, geez, I made that mistake. Learn from that. Don't change your log and send it in. That's not fair. When the contest is over, it's over. Send your log in and then figure out what's going on. Some people record the contest and replay it later. That's okay, but don't change anything as a result. Slap yourself in the forehead. Say, every time I work S55SH, I get him as S55HH. Okay, that's understandable, but learn the call, get it right. Don't ask other guys who they worked. It used to be after every contest, you'd see people put notes on their local contest reflector or contester club email list. I worked BY1V. I was kind of surprised to hear China coming in on 10 meters in the afternoon so loud. Did anybody else work BY1V? Okay. And someone would say, gee, it was 6Y1V. You think the guy went back and changed the log? Yeah, probably. This one kills me, though. After every contest, I start getting emails now from people. And the great one now is, I had a problem with my computer and the times got goofed up. Can you tell me what time our QSO was? If you're not sure I'm in your log, or you're in my log, you're not in my log. And no rubber clocking. Don't go back and change the times to make it fit the off-time specifications of the contest. That's not written down, but it should be obvious. It's something you're doing that is kind of bending the rules. You're responsible for your own reputation, so you should follow the rules, and you should not participate with people who are cheating. There's an old saying, if you lay down with dogs, you'll probably get fleas. And even if you don't get fleas, everyone's going to think you got fleas, and they're not going to want to hang around with you very much. As I said before, you never know who's listening or watching. Don't do anything you would not want made public. I gave this example last year. Is Bob MD0CCE here? He was here last year. There was an incident a couple of years ago in the Work All Europe contest. I was running along on 20, and MD0CCE called in, and I realized that I hadn't worked them on 15, and I'd missed the opening. I said, can we try it on 15? He said, yeah, okay, sure, let's give it a try. It's kind of late, but we'll go. Went to 15. I called him and called him and called him. I thought I heard a little burbling noise come up, and I said, that must be him. I'll give him a report. So I gave him a number, and I listened, and all I heard was, and there was nothing that resembled a number that I could copy. I missed that multiplier. Went back to 20, started running for a little while. Bob called in and said, hey, I'm not sure you got my number on 15 meters. Do you want me to give you the number now? I said, well, I really didn't hear you, so I didn't put it in the log, so that's that. And I didn't think anything of it. It was just, it was a casual comment. The next day, it shows up on CQ contest. Someone was listening to me running, guys, and said, you'll never believe what I heard. I heard this guy turned down the opportunity to get a fill on a number that he missed. It would have been a multiplier for the guy, and he said he didn't want it. Well, you build your reputation that way. If I had said, yeah, I didn't get your number, Bob. Go ahead and give me the number. Great, thanks a lot. Now I can fix it in the log. If the same guy who posted that note to CQ Contest heard that exchange, my reputation would have been a whole lot different. There would have been, yesterday on 20 meters, I heard a station ask someone to fill the number that he missed on another band. And my reputation would have been mud. You should be vocal. When you see cheating, you should confront it. Every incident is an opportunity to kind of course correct a little bit and bring someone back in line. Let's talk about golf. Anyone know who this guy is? Recognize him? His name's Brian Davis. A few years ago, he was playing in the Verizon Heritage Golf Tournament, and he was in a playoff. He had a chance to win $1.5 million. And he was in the sand trap, and he reached back with his swing, hit the ball, and it popped up onto the green. But on his backswing, he noticed that there was a piece of grass. You see there's some dead grass there behind him. And one of the pieces of grass kind of wiggled about the time he's on his backswing. Now in golf, there's a rule that your club can't hit anything besides the ball. It's a penalty. It's a two-stroke penalty. And no one said anything, but he said, excuse me, I need one of the officials over here with a video camera. I think I may have hit a blade of grass here on my backswing. Can you check it? And they said, well, we didn't see anything, but okay, if you insist. And they checked it. Sure enough, he had just brushed a blade of grass. Two-stroke penalty, came in second as a result. The difference between first and second was $400,000. So this guy's integrity was worth $400,000. And you know what? He became a cult hero. He was invited to speak at civic groups, at schools. He got flooded with congratulatory letters for doing the right thing. Let's talk about another golfer. That guy's got some of his own personal problems. He came in number 4 in the Masters tournament after he had not been playing golf for a few months due to some issues. And they interviewed him and said, hey, Tiger, you know, it's been a while. This is your first tournament back, your first time back on the tour. And, you know, how do you feel? You came in 4th. I came to win. I didn't win. That's all there is to it. Nobody felt sorry for him. And last week I was driving home and I heard on the radio that he was playing in some other tournament and he had a lousy score in the front 9 of like a 4-day tournament. He withdrew. If I can't win, I'm not going to play the game. No. And the guy on the left said, I can win by not telling anybody that I hit that blade of grass, but, you know, $400,000 is a lot of money. Nah, he did the right thing. Peer pressure is an important part of our game because we don't have on-site referees most of the time. Nobody's watching you. We don't have, as I said, this is a kind of sport. Both birding and ham radio contesting is not much of a spectator sport. During the WRTC 1990 in Seattle, K1AR and I were operating at the home of a guy who was really not into contesting. And so we started operating, and we're going along, and this guy is just kind of putting up with the fact that he's got these 2 guys up in his attic using his antennas. And our referee, who was W608T, tapped him on the shoulder at one point and said, these guys are really rocking. They could win. These could be the world champions of this game. And he said, really? Really? In my shack here? So he got all excited. He went and hooked up his video camera, put it in the shack behind us, piped it down to his living room, and invited all his neighbors to come in and watch and said, hey, I've got world champions right there in my attic. See, you can watch them right here on TV. And all you could see was the back of our heads talking to the radio. There's not much spectator appeal to our sport. But nobody's watching. So we have to rely on peer pressure, generally after the fact and a little bit before the fact, so that people do the right thing. Now, there's good peer pressure, which is encouraging people to follow the rules because people respect those who are true to their beliefs. There's also bad peer pressure, which is letting other people influence you into not doing the right thing. And the usual excuse, and if you're a parent, this will sound familiar, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is running high power. Everyone else is sneaking a smoke in the men's room or the boys' room at school. Well, no. Back to birding for a moment. There is a code of ethics in birding. Just like our sport, they don't have many spectators. They have one guy with a really bad reputation, by the way. Nobody believes him. He always says, "Oh, I saw one of those," and everyone says, "That bird hasn't been seen in North America in 57 years. Why should we believe that you actually saw this thing?" We have contesters that no one believes too. So they have actually a code of birding ethics. It says if you witness unethical behavior, assess the situation, intervene if you think it prudent. When interceding, inform the person of the inappropriate action and attempt within reason to have it stopped. If the behavior continues, document it and notify appropriate individuals or organizations. That's not bad. That's pretty practical. When you're trying to apply peer pressure, you have to make sure the person that you're talking to is receptive. This is a cartoon from the far side. And you can see this guy is chewing out his dog, saying, "Okay, Ginger, I've had it. You stay out of the garbage. Understand, Ginger? Stay out of the garbage or else." And what the dog hears is, blah, blah, blah. "Ginger, blah, 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 blah. Ginger, blah, blah, blah." There are times when you're not going to be able to get everything through, and some people who are exhibiting bad behavior actually appreciate the attention. All they can hear is someone saying their name. Even bad publicity is good publicity. Well, when you're applying positive peer pressure, be aware of your motives. Is it personal or professional? You ought to get this guy, or you ought to try and make all of contesting better. If necessary, enlist others to help deliver your message. If you come from a different cultural background than the person whose behavior you're trying to correct, that might be a problem. You need to get someone from the same local cultural background to do the dirty work. Give the benefit of the doubt, because there is a chance that the guy doesn't realize what he's doing is against the rules. One of the things that's a big deal in checking contest logs now is single operators who are using the cluster. Use of the cluster is not permitted in the single operator unassisted category in some contests. There are a lot of casual contesters who use the cluster all the time for their casual DXing, and in contests where it is permitted, and they just sort of don't pay attention to the rules, saying, "Oh, yeah, I remember there's a contest where I can use the cluster. That's how I operate all the time anyway. I'll just send in the log." And it shows up in the log checking. There are some tools to try and look at cluster spots versus what guys work. And guys, maybe some of you here in this room have gotten a note from the contest director saying, "We've been looking at your log, and it looks like you were using the cluster, but you claimed the unassisted category. Did you, by any chance, submit in the wrong category?" And most guys say, "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I meant to check assisted. Yes, that's right, I was using the cluster." There are a few people who say, "Nope, absolutely not. I was not using the cluster." And then you find out that there are call signs that don't exist in nature that actually were spotted as busted calls on the cluster, and they show up in the guy's log. But the point is that some people don't realize what they're doing is against the rules. So give them the benefit of the doubt, which is what the contest directors do. Choose the right time. Can the guy listen without feeling attacked? Don't be angry or accusatory. Treat the issue as a mistake, not a crime. Focus on the actions, not the character. You're a good person, but this thing that you did was a bad thing. That's two different messages, and don't confuse them. And be there, right? People cheat because they see others get away with it in some cases, and not confronting the problem hurts everybody. I mean, we don't want our sport to be, yeah, they have this thing, but the rules are full of holes because people cheat all the time and get away with it. Well, that's not the reputation we want. So let's not do that. Oh, by the way, here's another Far Side cartoon. What we say to cats: "Well, Fluffy, you've clawed the furniture for the last time. I'll not tolerate that behavior anymore." And you see what the cat hears? Nothing. There are some people that when you go to them and say, "Listen, I know you're running high power. I saw you unpack the amplifier. I've seen the 3-inch feed lines, the 3-phase 480-volt line, power line coming in. I know you're running high power. Cut it out." And some of them are going to hear nothing. Do the best you can. So scenario number 1, you discover a local contester using cluster spotting, and he enters a single op unassisted. What do you do if you're not a contest director? Well, one choice is, hey, he's a little guy, doesn't win anything, doesn't matter. Just ignore the guy, never talk to him again. Go to the next club meeting and call him out on it. Send a letter to the contest sponsor, or call him up and say, are you aware of the rules for single operator? I mean, every cluster, I was assisted, and every time I went to a cluster pileup, there you were calling before me. You know, you do realize the rule is like this. Which one of those would you personally pick? Think about it. It's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it. Scenario number 2. You're invited to go to a multi-op somewhere. And when you get there, you find out they're running 2.5 kilowatts. What do you do? Well, you're there. Loud is good. Operate anyway. Or turn the power down to 1,500 watts when you're operating. Or loudly encourage all the other ops to follow your example. Or take the owner aside and say, do you always run this much power? Or you could leave. All those are possible ways of dealing with it. Some will have an effect and some will have no effect at all. You could send a note to the contest sponsor and the FCC. So let's get back to this. Why do we do radio contests? Well, we do it for fun. Like I said, the financial rewards just aren't there. We do it for self-improvement. You know, we've all discovered the magic of wireless communications. We've got this ionosphere. We've got social networking without the internet. You know, we can talk to people all over the world, and the more you learn how to use it, the more fun it is. It's like any sport. The better you get at it, the more fun it is. There's a personal satisfaction of, yes, I've finally figured out how to put up a decent signal on 160 meters because I did much better this year than I did before. The antenna work that I did this summer really, really paid off. There's some satisfaction there. And then there's the peer recognition, as I said, people coming up to you here at Dayton saying, wow, that was some score. But your enjoyment of contesting should be about the journey, not the destination. About that destination. If a plaque is really what you're in the game for, here's a couple of easier options than actually earning one. There are plaque-making shops all over the world, all over the country. Go to the one in your town and buy a plaque. They'll put whatever you want on it. They don't care. You pay them $50, you can get a plaque that says whatever you want. Or you can cheat in some undetectable way. This contest sponsors can't police power until someone shows up in your shack. Especially on CW, we can't police whether there's another guy taking over and operating for you for a while. There are a few other things that the contest directors can't police. Hopefully I haven't embarrassed any of the contest directors here by admitting that we can't tell how much power a guy is running from his Cabrillo log, but that's the facts, Jack. Now, if you have a little bit of a conscience and you really want a plaque, but you want to admit, you can get a plaque made with an asterisk. Like, you can get one made like this. I do some plaques for CQ, by the way, so I've got the logo. And you can get a plaque made with an asterisk saying it's winner, but the asterisk can indicate that you ran 5 kilowatts, you had K1AR come over and operate while you took a nap, you used a skimmer cluster, and you used the telephone to call up multipliers. You know? So I do the plaques for the WPX and the 160 contest. So if your conscience is really nagging at you and you want a plaque and you want a plaque to say really what you did, let me know. It'll be just between you and me, and no one else needs to know. Now, here's when I hear sometimes from guys who hear, you know, rants like this. I give talks at the local contest club once in a while, and you know, I rant about how you shouldn't cheat, you shouldn't run high power and all that. And one thing that comes up, people come up to me after and say, you know, I'm not really a contender for an award. I'm not a big gun. It doesn't matter if I cut corners a little bit. Well, yeah, it does, because the bad habits early on become seriously bad habits later. If you decide you're going to enter single op and use the cluster because it's the only way you can find multipliers, you're not used to turning that big knob in the middle of the radio and finding stuff on your own. As you get better and you start making more contacts and you buy an amplifier and you put up big antennas and you move to a hilltop and you start getting near the top of the scores and you still can't tune the big knob, and the only way you can find multipliers is with the cluster, you've got some seriously bad habits and you're not going to be able to compete. So you really ought to learn how to do it right when you're not a big gun. Most of today's big guns started with pathetic little stations and worked their way up. And they learned with their pathetic little stations that if you call on exactly the same frequency everyone else is calling, all the bigger guys are going to get through before you. So you move the FO over a little bit and you call a little off frequency. And if everyone's calling at 20 words a minute, you call it 30. If everyone's calling it 30, you call it 35 or 25. Do something to make yourself stand out. You learn all those little operating tricks when you have a pathetic little station. If you're trying to buy your way to the top in contesting, say, oh, it looks like a pretty good sport. How much does it cost to build the biggest station in the world and get the biggest radios? Well, you know, you're better off spending the time on the air rather than trying to figure out where you can spend the most money. Your reputation gets established early. You know, guys who get into contesting and just get on with the big amplifier and get through the pileups first, those reputations get started early. I saw a sermon a while back which was great. It was talking about dealing with temptation. You know, most people have the cluster available. It's your choice whether you use it or not use it in a contest. And if you're entering a category where it's not permitted, you should turn it off. But the temptation is there because all you got to do is this little mouse click and boom, all these multipliers show up right on your screen that you can run and work and improve your score. But the sermon was great. It said, dealing with temptation is really hard, but I found a solution. Just give in. It's so much easier that way. And the more you give in, the easier it becomes to deal with temptation. It's not a problem. Well, that sort of misses the whole point. You know, you got to have a little moral fiber and get around it. Now, I mentioned that the birders have a code of ethics, and the contesters have not. The contesters do now. There was an organization that started a little over a year ago called the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation. I was privileged to be one of the people on the startup team and was the chairman last year. K1AR is chairman this year. He took over. I have another project I'm working on. But that's the website, and after a lot of debate, we created this Contesters Code of Ethics. And you should all take a look at it and make sure you're applying it, and make sure the people in your contest club are all applying it too. And they're all really, really basic, but you know, ever since we went to electronic log submissions, we don't have that little thing at the bottom of the front page that says, by signing here, I certify that I have obeyed all the rules of the contest and all the regulations for amateur radio in my country. And you know, you always used to have to look at that and say, yep, okay, I can sign that. Well, we don't even have that now. So we think an electronic, widely spread contest code of ethics is important. And they're not really that over the top. They're real simple. Here's sort of the expansion. I will learn and obey the rules of any contest that I enter, including the rules of my entry category. That means no cluster if not permitted, no second op for single ops, off times per the rules, the correct output power. Simple stuff. But there's so many guys. I mean, I have a confession to make. A couple of years ago, I got on in the NS Sprint on one Thursday night when I happened to be in front of the radio. I didn't know it was a 100-watt contest. After the contest, I heard everyone saying, boy, K1DG was really loud. Well, of course I was. I was running an amplifier. No one else was. That's why I was louder. I didn't read the rules. Sorry. You have to obey the rules for amateur radio in your country. That means power, frequency limits, licensing. A friend of mine just moved to a place and didn't learn the frequency allocations in his area. That was a problem for him because someone heard him operating where he shouldn't. I will not modify my log after the contest by using additional data sources to correct call sign and exchange errors. When it's over, it's over. That's simple. That's the way it ought to be. I'll accept the judging and scoring decisions of the contest sponsor as final. That means no whining about the calls that got taken out of your log on CQ contest, and no lawsuits or threats of lawsuits. You think I'm kidding about threats of lawsuits for people who have their scores reduced. I am not making this up, as Dave Barry would say. There's a thing called the DX Code of Conduct, which has really, really difficult to fathom concepts like listen before you call, or only call when you can hear the station, or don't trust the cluster because there's a good chance the call sign is wrong. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the DX code, and I would encourage you to take a look at it because it's all very good practical advice. And that's something that we're sort of subsuming into the contest code of ethics. Here's one that we don't think about much but makes sense. I will yield my frequency to any emergency communications activity. Because you know what? Contesting is a game, and emergency is real life. If someone says, you know, hey, you're bothering the Haitian earthquake disaster net, can you move down a little bit? Move down a little bit. It's not that hard. What you're doing is not as important as what they're doing. You know, a little bit of stuff like that to think about. And here's another one. In fact, this is the last one. There are only 7 points. We started with about 25 and then carved it down and ended up with 7. I will operate my transmitter with sufficient signal quality to minimize interference to others. That means if you've got an MP that hasn't modified, and every time you get on 160, people are putting packet notes out saying, this guy has got key clicks. You probably have key clicks. You probably shouldn't use that radio. Do something different. Keep your mic gain down below 10. Things like that. Here's another one you hear. All the guys at the top are cheating. Tim and I did a Contest University session in Italy a couple of years ago, and one guy came up and said, so, Tim, how much power are you and LPL and KC1XX really running? Tim said, well, 1,500 watts. Why? I said, no. What are you really running? You three stations are the first ones we hear when the band is open. You're the last ones we hear when the band is going out. Obviously, you're running more power than everybody. And Tim said, no, I'm running 1,500 watts. Frank's running 1,500 watts, and Matt's running 50. I mean, we've got operators that go between the stations. Everybody knows what we're doing, and if any one of those guys were to crank it up to 11, no one would operate there again, and the word would get out, and really no one would operate there again. So, you know, the way we make the big signals is with location and antennas, and a lot of work on antennas, and then some more work on antennas, and you know, some improvements in feed lines, and then some more work on antennas. It's not just going out and buying a great big box that sits in the corner. And there are some parts of the world where that's hard to believe. So the fact is that all the guys at the top are not cheating. There are a few. There are a few bad apples in every game, and they don't last long. If you want to cheat your way to the top, it's not real hard to do. Power is the easy one. But after a couple of years, that gets kind of boring, and those guys sort of drift away. We never hear from them again. And then the guys who are still banging away at it 20 years later are the ones who are playing by the rules. It turns out, by the way, that this is the primary reason that people cheat. And a lot of psychology studies have been done and papers written. Again, you can have a lot of fun on the internet Googling stuff when you're getting ready to do a talk on something you don't know very much about. But it turns out that one of the big ethical things, people don't cheat to gain an advantage. People cheat to eliminate a perceived disadvantage. Everyone else is cheating, so I have to. Everyone else is blood doping to win the Tour de France bike race, so I have to blood dope. Everyone else is using steroids to hit more home runs, so I have to use steroids. Whether other guys really are doing it is irrelevant. It's the perception that other guys are doing it that's important. So I think, you know, it's a responsibility for all of us here and all of you out there in webinar land listening, is to sort of stand up and say, you know what, not everyone is cheating. I'm not cheating. I'm not running high power. You can come to my station and see it. And, you know, when I operate single op, if you want, I'll video the whole 48 hours. It's not real, you know, inspiring video, but, you know, you'll see me sitting in front of the radio. No one else is going to come in when I get tired. You know, I'll do that. You have to sort of set the example. Nobody says that kind of stuff no one says about cheaters, things like they say about this Brian Davis golfer. You know, they said his honor, character, and integrity were of much higher standard than most, not allowing him to accept anything less than truly winning the tournament, playing by the rules. And what he lost on the course will be regained in his reputation for his honorable act. I'm still talking about this guy 2 years later after his tournament, and there are lots of other guys who are using him as an object lesson and an example. So the right way to do contesting, play fair. Pretty simple. Obey the rules. Remember this presentation. Go back and look at it in the archives of the webinar and pick up a few pointers here and there. Try to do better next time. You know, yeah, conditions are different year to year, but there's probably some guy you know who's got similar stations, similar capabilities, similar experience, and maybe he beat you by a little bit last year. Well, what do you have to do to try and beat him this year? Try and do that. Try and do better next time. Improve your skills, improve your station. And I saw this great ad. I forget what the product was, but it said, everything in moderation, except for fun. Have lots of that. And that's the important thing I want to leave you with here. A few acknowledgments. A lot of this material was originally prepared by Randy Thompson, who's in the back of the room, and Ken Adams, K5KA. When we decided we needed to talk on ethics here, Ken was the most stand-up guy we could think of, and he did a terrific job. Unfortunately, he was unable to come and present it because he got very sick and has passed away since then. Randy stepped up, took over what had been done, added to it a few more times. The analogies with birding I can't take credit for. They're originally developed by Dick Norton, N6AA. By the way, this whole parallel universe thing, I just started this other book called Word Freak. You know what it's about? Competitive Scrabble playing. And if you think the birders and we are nuts, they are one level beyond that. So the last point is, who's the final judge of how you do in the radio contest? Is it what's published in the results? Well, sort of, but really the person in the mirror. Joe Paterno, football coach, what school is he from? Penn State. Oh, Penn State. He once said, success without honor is an unseasoned dish. It'll satisfy your hunger, but it won't taste good. And the other thing is your peers. Here's a quote that I've heard. Yeah, I know that guy. He cheats. You don't want that said about you, right? So that's it. Thank you.
You can see why that Doug Grant, K1DG, is the chairman of WRTC 2014. So give him another round of applause.